We are completely dedicated to trying to help children live better lives and to grow up into adults that are happier adults and who are at much less risk for suffering from these major mental illnesses. And the way that we think is the best way to go about that is, one, to study young children, and two, to understand in animals how the brain works in relation to this vulnerability. There are certain things that you can do in children that are very useful, and we're actually now studying young children in the school age range, looking at their brains from the standpoint of brain imaging. But the animal models, and particularly the monkey models that we use, allow us to really understand how the brain circuits work, how the brain is, different parts of the brain are talking to each other, and exactly what the chemicals are in those parts of the brain that are likely to increase the effects of environment on making kids more vulnerable. So the question that we're asking is basically, if a child faces a mildly adverse environment, how does that then get translated in the brain to make the brain act in a way that's more sensitive to stress, more vulnerable, more likely to develop severe anxiety and depression? And you can't do that in children because in children there are limits on what we can do with imaging, and we really can't understand how these systems work together. The monkey model that we use is really critical, and I believe it's the best way to really help children from the standpoint of understanding what's going on, because the monkeys have brains that are very similar to human brains from the standpoint of the development. And one of the critical parts is the front of the brain, what we call the prefrontal cortex. It sits above our eyeballs, but it's sort of what gives instructions to the rest of our brain. And we think that that, in part, is what's really not functioning well in children who have severe anxiety. And we think that that's, when there's diversity in the environment, that's how that gets sort of registered. And the monkeys have that part of the brain, and so we can begin to look at that. The other thing that we can do in the monkeys is we can create environments that are mildly adverse, and then we can sort of control the situation and study with development how those animals develop. And so we think that that's really, really critical. The bottom line is that if we can understand what causes anxiety and what causes these stress-related reactions, then we can be a lot smarter about developing new, novel treatments that we think will be more effective and that we can use early in life to intervene to prevent the long-term effects of this disposition. And that's where the monkey allows us to do those studies.